I lowered myself onto the old white-painted wooden chair, facing my parents and my 2 younger brothers in the kitchen that used to feel like home. The familiar sense of pot roast and garlic bread hung in the air, bringing back memories of childhood family dinners. But tonight, something was different. Jack and Ryan, my twin brothers, lounged back in their chairs, smug grins playing on their faces. My parents, Mark and Susan, exchanged a brief glance before my mother spoke, her voice calm but controlled. "We need to talk to you about an important decision." I set my fork down, sensing the tension building in my chest. "We've finalized our will," my father said, his voice steady, though it lacked the usual warmth I had come to expect from him. "We want to make sure you hear it from us, so there's no confusion later on." Jack leaned back, his arms crossed, his smirk spreading across his face. "To put it bluntly, everything goes to us," he said. I froze. "What?" Ryan repeated it, almost cheerfully, as though he were sharing some trivial news. "Mom and Dad are giving us the house, the beach condo, and everything else. You get nothing." A heavy silence settled in the room, broken only by the soft hum of traffic outside the quiet suburban house. I turned to my mother, desperately hoping she would refute what I'd just heard, but instead, she nodded subtly, a firm look in her eyes. "We believe this is the best decision," she said, clutching a napkin in her lap. "You've got a steady job, a solid income. But Jack and Ryan are still figuring things out. They need more support." I looked at my father, waiting for some sign of regret, some hint of uncertainty, but he just stared into his glass of water, avoiding my gaze. My chest tightened with a mix of pain and rising anger. I'd sacrificed so much for them. 4 years, I had chipped away at their mortgage, paid for medical bills that stacked up, and bailed Jack and Ryan out when their finances fell apart. And this was how they repaid me. "So, after all I've done, you've decided I don't deserve anything?" My voice trembled, though I tried to hold it together, but the hurt was impossible to conceal. My mother sighed, her expression laced with disappointment. "Jessica, you always make everything about money." My hands balled into fists beneath the table, the sting of betrayal cutting through me. "It's not about money," I countered, my voice shaking but controlled. "It's about fairness. I've always been there when you needed me. But now, because I'm self-sufficient, because I don't rely on you, I'm not valuable to this family." Jack snickered, shaking his head dismissively. "You're overreacting. No one asked you to help. You just liked playing the martyr." Ryan joined in, his laughter light and mocking. "Maybe you thought if you threw enough money at us, Mom and Dad would finally love you as much as they love us." His words hit me like a slap, sharp and cold. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to step in, to shut him down, to defend me. But they didn't. They stayed silent. And in that silence, I realized everything I needed to know. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat threatening to choke me. With a deep breath, I steadied myself. "Fine," I said, my voice calm but firm. "If that's the decision, then I've got one of my own." Jack raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Oh yeah? And what's that?" I pushed my chair back and stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. "From now on, don't expect anything from me." I turned and walked away from the table, leaving behind their stunned, speechless faces. The smell of pot roast and garlic bread, once so comforting, now felt hollow, meaningless. As I walked out the door, no one stopped me. No one called out. There was no hesitation, no attempt to hold me back. And in that moment, I knew it was over. I stepped out of the house I had known for so long, but this time, it didn't feel like home. The sense of attachment, the warmth of family dinners, was gone. The door clicked shut behind me with a finality that echoed in my ears. The night air was cold, but my face burned with the heat of anger. As I drove away, I didn't bother with the radio. The silence felt necessary. I needed it to process everything. Why was I surprised? Hadn't I always known, deep down, that in their eyes, I was nothing more than a financial safety net? Back in my apartment, I slumped onto the couch, my hands shaking as I unlocked my phone. The conversation from earlier replayed in my head, each word sinking in deeper than the last. Jack and Ryan were getting everything, and me, the one who had bailed them out time and time again, who had paid Jack's tuition every time he decided on a new major, who had sent Ryan money for his fancy new car just so he could look good on social media, I was left with nothing. I opened my banking app, the numbers glaring at me like a cruel reminder: $1,900 every month for my parents' mortgage and bills, another $1,200 whenever Jack and Ryan called, whining about their money problems. They had always told me I was successful and didn't need their help, but what would happen to them without my support? Could they even keep their house? I hovered my finger over the automatic transfer section, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. 4 years, I had carried this weight, convinced it was my duty. But now, this was their choice. They had made it clear they didn't need me. No one was forcing me to keep up this routine. 1 second, 2 seconds. I pressed cancel. A notification flashed on the screen: recurring payments successfully stopped. A wave of emotion crashed over me: anger, bitterness, but also a strange sense of relief. I set the phone down and sank deeper into the couch, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders, a burden I had carried far too long. That night, sleep evaded me. I lay awake, replaying the last few years in my mind, the vacations I skipped to cover their mortgage, the late nights working overtime to send Jack money for tuition, the sacrifices I made, believing they meant something. But now that I needed just the smallest acknowledgement, one sign that my efforts were appreciated, they couldn't even give me that. The next morning, my phone rang incessantly. It was my mom. I hesitated before picking up. "Jessica, did you cancel this month's payment?" Her voice was sharp with worry, but she tried to mask it with that all-too-familiar disappointment. I took a slow breath. "Yes, Mom. I realized I don't have to do this anymore." There was a pause on the other end. "What do you mean?" "Family supports each other. You know we rely on that money for the bills." I clenched my jaw, keeping my voice steady. "Mom, family only matters to you when I'm paying for everything. I've helped for years, but in the end, I still don't mean anything to you. You're being selfish, Jessica." Her voice rose, a hint of anger creeping in. "Why are you acting like this just because of the will? Everything isn't about money." I couldn't help it, I laughed, but it wasn't out of humor. "Not about money. I was the one paying the bills, for you, for the whole family. If money doesn't matter, then why don't you ask Jack and Ryan to take care of you instead?" There was silence on the other end. I could practically hear her seething, frustrated at being called out. "I can't believe you're acting like this," she finally spat. "This isn't the Jessica I raised." I shut my eyes, feeling the weight in my chest. "Mom, this is me. But you never really saw me." I ended the call before she could say another word. Standing in my apartment, I let the emotions swirl around me. I knew she'd call again. Dad might try, too, and Jack and Ryan would undoubtedly jump in with their mockery or accusations. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel an obligation to answer. I was no longer the family's ATM. I wasn't the one carrying the load anymore. I had let go, and that, right then, felt like the best decision I had ever made. I placed my phone on the table, a mix of lightness and heaviness in my chest. Mom had said exactly what I expected, accusing me of selfishness, betrayal, and abandoning the family. But what she didn't realize was that I had heard those words so many times that they no longer held any power over me. I looked around my apartment, seeing it in a way I hadn't before. It wasn't just a pit stop between work and endless money transfers to my family. It was mine. The one place where I didn't have to carry anyone else's burdens. I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank statement. The list of monthly expenses was right there in front of me: transfers to my parents, to Jack, to Ryan, a constant reminder of the financial hold they had over me. But not anymore. One by one, I cancelled the payments, each confirmation feeling like a clean, decisive break from the past. $1,900 for the mortgage, gone. $600 for utilities, gone. I sat there, staring at the screen now free of recurring payments, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight lift. But, oddly enough, an emptiness began to creep in. I had spent so much time being the responsible daughter, the one who carried what Jack and Ryan never had to. Now, with those obligations gone, I was left wondering, what was I supposed to do with myself? I stood up, poured myself a glass of water, sipping it slowly. Outside, the city hummed, life moving on as usual. Yet, I felt as though I had just entered a new world, one where I could finally set my own rules. My phone buzzed, a message from Ryan. "What the hell are you doing? Jack just told me you cut off the money. Do you think this is funny?" I read it, but didn't respond. A few minutes later, another message popped up, this time from Jack. "You're a traitor. Don't expect any of us to consider you family ever again." I smirked, not out of happiness, but because for the first time, I understood the truth. I had never truly been part of this family. I was just their bank account. I put my phone down and stepped onto the balcony. The night air was cool against my skin, a refreshing breeze that brought me some clarity. I took a deep breath. I had done the right thing, and nothing would make me change my mind now. The next morning, my phone rang incessantly. I didn't even need to check the screen to know who it was. Slowly, I picked it up. Mom's voice hit me before I even had the chance to greet her. "Jessica, what are you thinking?" She nearly shouted, her tone a mixture of anger and panic. "Why did you cancel the payments? You know we need that money to cover the bills." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. "Mom, I can't do this anymore. I've helped enough." She was silent for a moment, then her voice snapped back, harsh and accusing. "Helped? You're abandoning your family. Have you even thought about how this affects us? We sacrificed so much for you, and this is how you repay us." I couldn't help but let out a dry laugh. "Sacrificed? Really? If I owe you for raising me, haven't I already paid you back by funding this whole family?" Mom hesitated, but then she fired back, her voice growing sharper. "You've changed, Jessica. You've let money control you." "No, Mom," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "You let money control you. But I'm not your personal ATM anymore." There was a loud exhale on the other end, followed by a sharp click as she hung up. I stared at the screen, and more messages began to flood in. "Jack, you're ungrateful. Mom's crying because of you. Ryan, you think you're so smart? You'll regret this one day. Jack again, don't bother showing up at our parents' funeral when they're gone." I read each message, rage building beneath my skin. Not one apology. Not one question about why I'd done it. They didn't care how they'd treated me for years. They were just angry because I had stopped financing their lives. The phone rang again. Dad this time. I let it ring. It kept ringing. I turned off the ringer and went into my settings. Jack, Ryan, Mom. I blocked them all. Once I was done, I set the phone down, closed my eyes, and let out a long exhale. Silence filled my apartment. It was a rare, unfamiliar kind of peace. No more ringing, no more messages laced with guilt, no more manipulation. I stepped onto the balcony and inhaled the crisp morning air. This silence felt strange, but it was also liberating. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. 3 weeks passed without a word. No more relentless calls, no more guilt-laden messages from Mom. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had finally accepted the truth that I was no longer their financial safety net. Then, on a Friday evening, a message appeared on my screen. "Family meeting tomorrow at 7 p.m. Don't be late." Short. Cold. No explanation. I stared at the message, a sinking feeling spreading through my chest. A part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part, smaller yet insistent, urged me that maybe this was the last chance to set things right. Maybe they really wanted an honest conversation. I decided to go. As I stepped into my parents' house, the atmosphere felt suffocating, thick with tension. Jack and Ryan were already sitting on the couch, arms crossed, their faces as cold as ice. My father stood by the fireplace, while my mother sat in the armchair, her eyes red and puffy, as if she had been crying for hours. Before I could say anything, my mother spoke first, her voice trembling. "Jessica, I don't understand you anymore," she said. "How much farther do you want to go in tearing this family apart?" I frowned. "What are you talking about?" My father sighed heavily, looking at me with frustration. "You've put us in serious financial trouble. If you keep being so stubborn, your mother won't be able to handle it." I couldn't help but laugh, but it wasn't out of amusement. So now I'm the cause of Mom's exhaustion? What about all those years I carried this family financially? She seemed fine then. Jack scoffed, shaking his head. You always make everything about money. Do you really think the world revolves around you? Ryan leaned forward, arms crossed, his voice dripping with defiance. Come on, you have a good job, a comfortable life. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? You're just reaping the consequences of being selfish. Their words stung. I had come here, hoping for a real conversation, but all I was met with was guilt-tripping and pressure. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. If this is why you called me here, don't bother. I'm not coming back. My mother's face went blank, as though she couldn't process what I'd just said. What did you just say? I stood up, glancing around the house one final time. I've done everything I could to be part of this family, but if my worth to you is only measured by the money I provide, then I don't need that kind of love. No one spoke as I turned and walked toward the door. No one tried to stop me. This time, I was leaving for good. 2 days later, I returned to my apartment late at night and immediately knew something was wrong. My front door was sealed shut, covered in industrial foam, with the handle completely obscured. I reached out, touching the hardened foam, solid, cold, and deliberate. Someone had done this to keep me out. I took a step back, my heartbeat racing. This wasn't just a prank, this was a calculated attempt to block me from my own home. Without hesitation, I grabbed my phone and checked the hallway security camera. I fast-forwarded through the footage, and there it was, Ryan, wearing a hoodie and a baseball cap, but his stance and stride were unmistakable. He smirked as he sprayed foam into every crack of my door. My hands shook with fury. I didn't waste any time. I called the police. When the officers arrived, I showed them the footage. One of them nodded as he watched. Do you want to press charges? He asked. I gripped my phone tightly, a chill running down my spine. If I let this slide, it would only get worse. Ryan wasn't just upset, he was willing to go to extreme lengths. I took a deep breath, my voice firm. Yes, I want him held accountable. The next day, my phone rang again. I ignored it. Then it rang again, Dad. Then Jack. Finally, I picked up. Jessica, your brother got called in by the police. How could you do this to your own family? My father's voice was harsh, but I stayed calm. Ryan vandalized my property. If he doesn't want to face charges, he needs to pay for the damages. My father's tone shifted, though still full of anger. How much? Without hesitation, I replied, $3,000. How could you extort your own brother like this? I couldn't help but let out a dry laugh. It's not extortion, Dad. It's called consequences. The next morning, my bank account received a $3,000 transfer, accompanied by a bitter note, I never want to see you again. I read the message and felt nothing. A notification lit up my phone, a message from a distant relative. Jessica, is this true? People are saying you abandoned your family, even though they're struggling. I frowned. Another message popped up. How could you cut off your parents and brothers like this? They've cared for you your whole life. I opened my social media to see what was going on. My mother had posted a long Facebook message, claiming I had turned my back on the family during their time of need, that I was selfish, only cared about myself, and had left my aging parents and struggling brothers without any help. People who didn't know the full story flooded the comments, sympathizing with her and vilifying me. I scrolled through the responses, each one cutting deeper than the last. So sad when successful children forget where they came from. Parents sacrifice everything for their kids, and this is the thanks they get. Jessica must have let money get to her head. Anger surged within me, not because of the stranger's passing judgment, but because my own family had twisted the story to make me the villain. They didn't mention that I had paid the majority of my parents' mortgage. They didn't mention the tuition, the bills, or how I had helped Jack and Ryan pay for new cars and vacations. They conveniently left out the fact that Ryan had vandalized my apartment and that I had to involve the police. Instead, they painted me as a heartless daughter who turned her back on them. I sat there in silence for a few moments, letting the weight of it all settle in. Should I stay quiet, Let them control the narrative, and walk away from it all? No. I had endured their manipulation for far too long. I opened the app and tapped on New Post. If my family wanted to air their version of events, then it was time to set the record straight. And so, I started typing. I laid it all out, the $1,900 a month I sent to cover their mortgage, the tuition fees I paid, the money I sent for Ryan and Jack's new cars, vacations, and all the other financial help I had provided over the years. I exposed how they saw me only as an ATM, never as a daughter or sister. And I couldn't hold back the truth about Ryan sealing my apartment door with foam, forcing me to get the police involved. I didn't turn my back on my family. My family never saw me as part of them unless I was bringing in money. And now, I choose to stand up for myself. I hit post. Within hours, the post caused a frenzy. Relatives began asking questions, their curiosity piqued by the things they'd never known before. An aunt messaged me privately, asking if it was true that I had been financially supporting my family for years. Some extended family members even started calling out my mother for twisting the truth. But the loudest reactions came from my immediate family. Mom called immediately. I answered. Her voice was so full of rage, she could hardly get the words out. Jessica, what the hell did you just do? I stayed calm, knowing I had done the right thing. I told the truth, Mom. If you have the right to tell your version, so do I. She was breathless, her words tumbling out in a furious rush. You're humiliating this family. Your father is so ashamed, he won't even leave the house. Have you thought about how this makes Jack and Ryan feel? I gripped my phone tighter, but I didn't let her words shake me. Did they think about how I felt when Ryan vandalized my home? Did they think about me when I was breaking my back to pay their bills? She fell silent, but then, true to form, she twisted the situation. You're destroying this family, she said, her voice growing cold. If you do this, don't expect to come back. We are no longer family. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and then spoke my truth. Mom, you destroyed this family, not me. And I hung up. No tears. No regret. For the first time in my life, I felt a sense of relief. I had lost my family, but maybe they were never really my family to begin with. That phone call with my mother was the last time I heard her voice. After that, my family went completely silent. No more angry messages from Jack, no more furious calls from my father. All contact ceased, as though I had never existed to them. But this time, I didn't feel the slightest bit guilty. I was free. At first, the silence was strange. The evenings I once spent solving my family's financial issues were now mine. No more late-night calls begging for help. No more cancelled plans because someone needed money. I poured myself into my work, diving headfirst into a major project my company was developing. With laser focus, I not only completed it ahead of schedule but also secured a promotion. The day I received my promotion letter, I stood in my new office, looking out over the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows, feeling a quiet sense of pride. For the first time in my life, I could enjoy my success without feeling obligated to share it with anyone. Then, I decided it was time for a change. I had always dreamed of taking a long trip, but every time I considered spending money on myself, I felt pulled back into the web of responsibilities. But now, nothing was holding me back. I booked a ticket to Italy. The moment the plane landed in Florence, I felt like I had entered a new world. The cobblestone streets, the outdoor cafes perfumed with the aroma of freshly brewed espresso, the historic buildings whispering stories from centuries past, it all made me feel more alive than I had in years. I wandered through narrow alleyways, explored museums where I could finally see Renaissance masterpieces I'd only ever read about, and savored pasta so fresh it melted in my mouth. I drank rich red wine as the sun set behind the terracotta rooftops. For the first time, I wasn't burdened by the weight of others' expectations. I wasn't my family's source of support anymore. I was just me. One afternoon, I sat in a small cafe near Piazza della Signoria, sipping a cappuccino, when I heard a voice. You seem to really like this place. I looked up and saw a man with light brown hair, a relaxed smile, and an easy confidence. I think I just fell in love with this city, I said, taking another sip of my coffee. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me without asking, as if we were already old friends. "Me too," he said. "This is my third time coming back." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "A loyal traveler, huh? You could say that. My name's Chris." We talked for hours. He was from New York, worked in interior design, and had a deep passion for European architecture. His voice was steady and calming, with a hint of humor that made me laugh effortlessly. I couldn't remember the last time I had a conversation without tension hanging in the air, without worrying about the weight of someone else's needs. With Chris, there were no hidden agendas, no expectations, just a genuine connection between two strangers. When I stood up to leave, he smiled and said, "If you ever want company while exploring Florence, I'd be happy to join you." I hesitated for just a second, then nodded. I think I'd like that. The next few days felt like a dream. Chris and I wandered through bustling local markets, sampled gelato from a shop that seemed to have the best I'd ever tasted, and walked along the Arno River as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with golden light. He never asked about my family, never pried into my past. He simply saw me for who I was in that moment, a woman finally claiming her freedom. For the first time in my life, I felt valued for just being myself, not for what I could do for others. One evening, as we sat on a rooftop terrace, I looked out at the sparkling city lights and smiled. I had once believed that my happiness depended on being needed, on giving and giving until I had nothing left. I had once thought that if I gave enough, my family would love me the way I wanted. But the truth was, I didn't need to beg for love from people who never truly saw me. I could create my own happiness. And right there, under the Italian night sky, I knew I was doing just that. When I returned from Italy, I returned with a fresh perspective. I was no longer the Jessica who had sacrificed everything for a family that never truly appreciated her. I was stronger, freer, and more myself than I had ever been. The next months unfolded in peace. I focused on work, took up yoga on Sundays, met new people, and slowly started embracing the life I had put on hold for too long. But then, the news about my old family started trickling in. I was making coffee one morning when my phone buzzed, a message from Aunt Linda, my mother's cousin. "Jessica, I know you don't care about the family anymore, but your parents are really struggling. Your father's working night shifts at a warehouse, and your mother's taking hourly cleaning jobs. They both look worn out." I stared at the screen for a moment, processing. I had seen this coming. When I was financially supporting them, my parents never once considered standing on their own. They depended on me like a lifeline, never stopping to think about how drained I was. And now that I had cut them off, they had to face the reality of their situation. I set my phone down without replying. A few days later, a friend told me that Jack had lost his job due to poor performance and that Ryan was still trying to make it as a social media influencer without any real success. I wasn't surprised, and I no longer felt responsible for them. They had the chance to change, to learn how to be independent, but they hadn't. And now, they had to face the consequences of their own choices. I once thought that not spending Christmas with my parents and brothers would leave me feeling lonely, but as the holiday approached, something shifted. I realized that I had people who truly cared about me, and that was what mattered most. I decided to host a small gathering at my apartment. Aunt Emily arrived early, carrying a box of homemade cookies and a warm embrace. "I'm so proud of you, Jessica," she said as I opened the door. I smiled, feeling a bit of relief. "You're the only one in the family who's ever said that to me." Emily looked at me with understanding in her eyes, tinged with sadness. "I just wish they'd realized your worth before it was too late." I didn't have a response to that. Instead, I poured her a glass of wine and invited her inside. As the evening went on, my friends arrived, bringing wine, desserts, and laughter. That night, I laughed more than I ever had during any Christmas before. There were no forced conversations, no pressure to meet anyone's expectations, just me, finally enjoying my life on my own terms. When midnight struck, I stepped onto the balcony, looking out at the twinkling Christmas lights across the city, and felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: peace. No more hidden burdens, no more feeling taken for granted, just me, my life, and the people who truly loved me for who I was. And in that moment, I realized, That was the greatest Christmas gift I could ever ask for. I sat in my armchair, watching the city lights bounce off my window. Outside, life was going on, cars speeding by, people bustling along the glowing streets, but inside, there was a stillness I had never felt before. I had once thought family was everything, that I had to sacrifice for them no matter how they treated me. I had convinced myself that if I gave enough, if I did enough, they would finally see me, love me. But the truth was different. Family isn't just about blood, it's about who appreciates you, who doesn't take advantage of you, who loves you unconditionally. And my parents, Jack and Ryan, they had never really seen me as family in that way. I thought back to the moment they cut me out of the will, as if trying to make a point that I meant nothing to them except for my money. They thought that would break me, that I would beg for their acceptance again. But what they didn't understand was that they had actually given me the best gift of all. They severed the last tie between us. They set me free. I had been a woman weighed down by responsibility, expectations, and sacrifices that were never truly appreciated. But now, I had the power to choose my own life. I could go anywhere, do anything, and never again feel obligated to answer a call demanding money or a guilt trip for not complying with their wishes. I could spend my time with the people who truly cared about me, friends who had supported me even when I had nothing left to give, an aunt who had quietly been there for me all along. I could love and be loved freely, in a way I had never experienced before. I glanced at my phone on the table. There were no missed calls from my family. They had let me go, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of that. I picked up my glass of wine, taking a slow sip, feeling its warmth spread through me. I had once lived my life for my family. Now, I lived for myself. And that wasn't selfish, that was freedom. Jessica's story is more than just a personal tale, it's something many of us can relate to. We grow up thinking that family is the ultimate source of love and support, and that love is tied to responsibility. But the truth is, family bonds don't always come with appreciation. Sometimes, walking away isn't selfish, it's the only way to protect yourself. When your sacrifices go unnoticed and you're being taken advantage of, you have every right to put yourself first. After all, this life is yours to live. What do you think about Jessica's journey? If you were in her shoes, would you keep sacrificing for family, or would you choose to walk away and find your own happiness? Share your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to follow the channel for more meaningful stories about life and family.